Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. For background, my mom is a 58-year-old disabled veteran. She served in the Army for 12 years before a training accident left her with severe spinal injuries. After years of surgeries and physical therapy, she can walk short distances with braces and crutches, but mainly uses a wheelchair to get around. She's one of the strongest people I know, but the last few years have been rough on her. After my dad passed away 2 years ago, Mom decided she needed a fresh start. She sold their old two-story house and used the money to buy a single-level ranch home in this supposedly lovely community with amenities for active adults. The house itself was perfect. Wide doorways, an accessible bathroom, and a nice open layout. The only modification she needed was a wheelchair ramp at the front entrance. I helped her hire a contractor who specialized in accessible home modifications. He built a beautiful wooden ramp that blended perfectly with the house's aesthetic. It was stained to match the porch, had attractive railings, and even included some built-in planters to make it look like a natural extension of the front entrance. It wasn't just functional, it was actually a nice addition to the house. Everything seemed fine for the first few months. Mom was settling in, making a few friends in the neighborhood, and seemed happier than she'd been since Dad died. Then the letter arrived. It was from the Homeowners Association, informing Mom that her unauthorized structure, the wheelchair ramp, violated the neighborhood covenant. They demanded that she remove it within 30 days or face daily fines of $100. According to them, front-facing modifications that alter the architectural uniformity of the neighborhood were prohibited. When Mom called me in tears, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "They can't be serious," I said. "It's a wheelchair ramp. You literally need it to enter and exit your home." "The letter says I should have submitted plans for approval before installation," Mom replied, her voice shaking. "But the realtor told me it wouldn't be an issue since it's an accessibility modification." I immediately drove over to see her and read the letter myself. Sure enough, it cited some obscure clause in the HOA covenant about maintaining neighborhood aesthetic standards and property values. It was signed by the HOA president, a woman named Karen. I swear that's her real name. I'm not making this up. "Don't worry, Mom," I assured her. "This has to be a misunderstanding. I'll talk to them." The next day, I called the HOA office and asked to speak with Karen. The receptionist put me through after I explained the situation. "This must be a mistake," I said after introducing myself. "My mother is a disabled veteran who literally cannot enter her home without the ramp." Karen's voice was cold and dismissive. "We understand her situation, but rules are rules. The board has determined that the structure doesn't meet our community standards. Perhaps she could consider a removable ramp that can be stored out of sight when not in use." I was dumbfounded. "A removable ramp? She uses a wheelchair full-time. Are you suggesting she should have to set up and take down a ramp every time she wants to enter or leave her house?" "Our concern is maintaining property values," Karen replied. "Front-facing modifications are subject to strict oversight. Your mother did not submit her plans for approval before construction." "Because the realtor told her accessibility modifications were automatically approved under the Fair Housing Act," I countered. "The realtor was mistaken," Karen said flatly. "The HOA board has final say on all exterior modifications. The deadline stands." I hung up fuming. How could anyone be so heartless? I spent the next 2 days researching housing laws and HOA regulations, and everything I found suggested they couldn't legally do this. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination based on disability, and that includes refusing reasonable modifications like wheelchair ramps. I drafted a letter citing the relevant laws and sent it to the HOA board. Their response was infuriating, a formal letter stating they'd reviewed the situation and were standing by their decision. They claimed that since my mother had agreed to the covenant when purchasing the home, she was bound by their architectural standards regardless of her disability. Mom was devastated. "Maybe I should just move," she said one evening. "I don't want to cause trouble." "Absolutely not," I told her. "You love this house, and you have every right to live here with the accommodations you need. We're going to fight this." That's when I decided to call in the big guns. My grandfather, Mom's dad. Grandpa is a 79-year-old retired Marine Corps colonel who spent his post-military career as a civil rights attorney. He's fought in 2 wars and countless courtrooms, and he doesn't back down from anyone. When I called and explained the situation, there was a long silence on the other end. Then Grandpa said in his calm but steely voice, "I'll be there tomorrow." Grandpa arrived the next morning driving his truck with Marine Corps and Attorney Association stickers prominently displayed on the back window. He was wearing a perfectly pressed button-down shirt and slacks, looking every bit the distinguished attorney despite his age. The only hint of his military background was his ramrod straight posture and the Marine Corps ring on his right hand. He reviewed all the documents, inspected the ramp, and then sat down to make some calls. I've never seen someone work a phone with such efficiency. By lunchtime, he had spoken to several disability rights attorneys, a contact at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and a buddy who worked for the local news station. "Let me handle this," he told us. "I think it's time I introduced myself to this HOA board." The HOA had a scheduled meeting that evening. Normally, these meetings weren't open to the public except for a brief comment period at the beginning, but Grandpa had no intention of being limited to a 3-minute comment. We arrived at the community center where the meeting was being held. Grandpa was carrying a briefcase full of documents and had the look in his eye that Mom later told me was the same one he had before heading into battle. The meeting room was half full with board members sitting at a table at the front. I recognized Karen immediately from her profile picture on the HOA website, a middle-aged woman with an expensive-looking haircut and an air of self-importance. When the public comment period was announced, Grandpa stood up and walked to the podium. He introduced himself in a voice that instantly commanded attention. "Good evening. My name is Colonel Redacted, United States Marine Corps, retired. I'm also a practicing attorney specializing in civil rights and housing discrimination. I'm here representing my daughter, a disabled Army veteran who has been ordered by this board to remove the wheelchair ramp that provides her with access to her home." Karen tried to interrupt. "Sir, we appreciate your concerns, but the board has already made its decision on this matter. If you'd like to appeal..." Grandpa cut her off with a polite but firm, "I'm not finished, ma'am." The room went silent. Grandpa continued, "I've reviewed your covenant, your board's decision, and the relevant federal and state laws. Based on my assessment, your order to remove my daughter's wheelchair ramp constitutes a clear violation of the Fair Housing Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and state accessibility laws." He began pulling documents from his briefcase. "I have here a letter from the Department of Housing and Urban Development confirming that HOA cannot enforce aesthetic regulations that have the effect of limiting access for disabled residents. I also have documentation of 3 recent cases in which HOA were successfully sued for similar actions, resulting in settlements exceeding $300,000. He passed copies to each board member as he spoke. "Additionally, I've drafted a formal complaint to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, which I will file tomorrow morning unless this matter is resolved tonight." The board members were looking increasingly uncomfortable. One of them, an older gentleman, whispered something to Karen, who was turning progressively paler. Grandpa wasn't done. "Furthermore, I've been in contact with several local news outlets who have expressed interest in covering this story. Channel 7 is particularly interested in doing a feature on how this community treats disabled veterans." He paused to let that sink in, then continued. "I should also mention that I've reached out to the Veterans Affairs Office and several veterans advocacy groups who are prepared to organize a protest outside your community gates this weekend." By this point, you could hear a pin drop in the room. Several homeowners who were attending the meeting were giving the board members dirty looks. Grandpa placed his hands on the podium and leaned forward slightly. "Members of the board, my daughter honorably served this country. She sacrificed her health and mobility in service to the very freedoms that allow you to live peacefully in this community. The idea that she should be penalized for requiring a wheelchair ramp, a basic necessity for her mobility, is not just illegal, it's morally reprehensible." He straightened up. "I'm prepared to fight this through every legal channel available to me, for as long as it takes. I've got plenty of time and resources, and I've spent my career fighting much tougher opponents than a homeowners association that's bullying a disabled veteran." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, the older gentleman on the board cleared his throat. "Colonel, perhaps we've been hasty in our decision. Maybe we should reconsider." Karen interrupted him. "We can't just make exceptions for everyone who asks. There are procedures in place." Another board member, a woman who hadn't spoken yet, cut her off. "Karen, for God's sake, we're talking about a wheelchair ramp for a disabled veteran. This isn't about someone painting their house purple." The board quickly devolved into hushed but heated discussions. Grandpa stood calmly at the podium, waiting. Finally, Karen called for a brief recess, and the board members left the room to confer privately. When they returned 15 minutes later, the older gentleman took the microphone. "The board has reconsidered its position. We will be rescinding the violation notice immediately. Additionally, we will be reviewing our procedures regarding accessibility modifications to ensure we're in full compliance with federal law." A small victory, but I wasn't satisfied, and neither was Grandpa. He remained at the podium. I appreciate the board's reconsideration, he said. However, this doesn't address the emotional distress my daughter has endured over the past weeks due to your threats of daily fines and forced removal of her accessibility equipment. Nor does it address the fundamental problem that your covenant, as currently written and enforced, appears to violate federal housing laws. He pulled another document from his briefcase. I've taken the liberty of drafting a proposed amendment to your covenant that would bring it into compliance with federal accessibility laws. I suggest you adopt it immediately to avoid potential liability in the future. Karen looked like she wanted to object, but the older gentleman took the document. We'll review this and put it to a vote at our next meeting. With all due respect, Grandpa replied, this isn't optional. Federal law supersedes your covenant. I'm giving you the opportunity to correct this voluntarily before I'm forced to file formal complaints with the appropriate agencies. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, one of the other board members, a middle-aged man who hadn't spoken yet, said, I move that we vote on this amendment tonight under our emergency action procedures. After some further discussion and clear reluctance from Karen, the board voted 4-1 to adopt the amendment, with only Karen opposing. They also unanimously approved a formal apology to my mother and confirmed in writing that her wheelchair ramp was permanently approved. As we left the meeting, several homeowners approached us to express their support and apologize for the board's behavior. One elderly man shook Grandpa's hand and said, Thank you for your service, Colonel, both in the military and here tonight. The next day, a formal letter arrived rescinding the violation notice. It included a personal note from the board, excluding Karen, apologizing for the misunderstanding and thanking my mother for her service. But the story doesn't end there. About a week later, Grandpa received a call from a disability rights attorney he'd contacted. Apparently, our case had sparked interest because the same HOA had forced another disabled resident, an elderly man with Parkinson's, to remove his accessibility modifications the previous year. The attorney was building a case against the HOA for a pattern of discrimination and wanted to know if we'd be willing to provide testimony. Grandpa, being Grandpa, didn't just agree to testify, he offered to join the legal team pro bono. Over the next few months, they uncovered several other instances of the HOA discriminating against disabled and elderly residents. They filed a class action lawsuit against the HOA, specifically naming Karen and 2 other board members who had consistently voted against accessibility accommodations. Rather than face a lengthy and public legal battle, the HOA settled. They agreed to 1. Create a dedicated fund for accessibility modifications for qualifying residents. 2. Implement mandatory training for all board members on fair housing laws. 3. Adopt comprehensive accessibility guidelines that complied with federal standards. 4. Pay damages to the affected residents, including my mom. 5. Cover all legal fees. There was also a confidential term in the settlement that we weren't supposed to discuss publicly, but which resulted in Karen voluntarily stepping down from the board. The new HOA president is actually the older gentleman who tried to reason with Karen during that first meeting. He's a retired high school principal who has been nothing but supportive of my mom. The most satisfying part came 3 months after the settlement, when the HOA actually launched a community initiative to help elderly and disabled residents with home modifications. They even featured my mom's ramp in their community newsletter as an example of an attractive, community-enhancing accessibility solution. Mom is doing great now. She's made friends in the neighborhood and even joined the garden club. The HOA's new accessibility fund helped her install an automatic door opener and some additional grab bars in her bathroom. As for Grandpa, he's become something of a local hero. He's been invited to speak at several community meetings about accessibility rights, and I heard he's helping another nearby HOA revise their covenant to be more inclusive. The whole experience taught me a powerful lesson. Sometimes it takes someone with the right knowledge, experience, and sheer force of will to stand up to institutional bullying. Not everyone has a retired Marine Corps colonel civil rights attorney for a grandfather, which makes me even more determined to speak up when I see injustice. Don't mess with disabled veterans, and definitely don't mess with their Marine Corps dads. Edit. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the supportive comments. A few people have asked for more details about the legal aspects, but I need to be careful since the settlement had a confidentiality clause. I can say that the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act were the primary legal bases for our case. Basically, housing providers, including HOA, cannot refuse to make reasonable accommodations in rules, policies, practices, or services when such accommodations may be necessary to afford a person with a disability equal opportunity to use and enjoy a dwelling. Edit 2. Someone asked for a picture of the ramp. I can't share photos for privacy reasons, but imagine a well-built wooden ramp with a gentle slope, attractive railings that match the house trim, and built-in planters along the sides with seasonal flowers. It actually improves the look of the house. Edit 3. To the person who asked if we could have just gone to court right away. Possibly, but Grandpa believes in giving people a chance to do the right thing before escalating to legal action. Plus, the approach we took uncovered the pattern of discrimination that led to the larger settlement benefiting multiple residents, not just my mom. Edit 4. Thanks for the awards, kind strangers. Grandpa says to tell you all Semper Fi, and that he's just glad his decades of being a stubborn old Marine could help make a difference. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Hey Reddit, I can finally share my story because now it is all over. I am on mobile also, English isn't my mother language, and this is my first post ever on Reddit, so please be gentle, haha. And sorry for the long post. To the backstory, this all happened in an EU country, I don't say which one, sorry. I did my apprenticeship in a mid to big size factory as a machine operator. After I completed my apprenticeship, I worked in the production for around 1 month. Then I got called into the office and they asked me if I can do some holiday replacement, so I said yes, why not, better hours and clean work. I got teach the systems, which was pretty easy because I manufactured those parts for 1 year. After my coworker came back from their vacation, they asked me to stay and became a part of their team, so I said yes, sounds good. So I was now working in the sale quality department. Now to the present time, 7 years later, our team increased from 5 worker to 15 because of restructuring, which helped us a lot. My boss retired last fall, and after Christmas, we got a new young boss around my age, 27, who was a major a-hole and sexist. We got a few weeks before him a new hire, a lovely young girl, age 19, which I trained her. If you are new, you are doing some error, which is totally fine in my opinion. So I come in last Tuesday to hear my new boss screaming like a maniac at this young girl. I asked her what happened, and she said she filled the wrong form, which happens even to me. My boss noticed it and screamed at her, I paraphrase it. Boss, you stupid little slut, who dumb can you be to fill out the wrong form? I should fire you and make sure that you never find any work in this field again. Coworker started crying at this point. Then my boss stormed into his office and slammed the door shut. I asked my coworker if she's okay, and she was still sobbing, so I brought her a coffee and took her to our office. Grandma, everyone loves here so much. I was at this point pretty pissed and told everyone what happened. After they learned what he did to our new coworker, 3 stormed into his office and quit after 25 years in this company. MX boss said to them that they are worthless and overpaid. They told us that, and a plan was formed, everyone will quit except for me for now. What my boss didn't know yet is we had a huge customer audit happening in 3 weeks, which I am the only certified to prepare for. If we fail this, it would cost us 15 to 20 million euros, and the customer would pull the contract. So after my boss learned that the whole department quit except for me, he was even more pissed. Boss, hey, why the hell did everyone quit me? Maybe because you are a-hole and a sexist pig. Boss, what did you just say, you a-hole? Me. You know what I said, and do you remember the big audit in 3 weeks by customer X? Boss, yeah? What's about that? Me. You know that I am the only one certified to prepare it, right? Boss, yeah, and me. I quit as well because I do not want to work for such a a-hole boss, see ya. And walked right out to my other coworkers to say goodbye in the whole factory. The production VP noticed it and asked what happened, so I told him and he was pissed. He called the CEO, which I knew pretty well, and said, Robert, the crap hit the fan big time, come down to the production floor now. The CEO asked if it's important, and the VP said if you want to pass the audit in 3 weeks, then move your ass down here now. So the CEO came running down with the entire C-suits and asked what's so important. Then I piped up and said our whole department quit today and won't come back until this mother ducker of boss gets removed and fired. Then they asked what happens, and we told them. They were mad and asked how they can fix it. I said fire him and hire a better fit. Because I held the most trainings and qualifications they asked me, which I gladly said yes. So we took him to my new office with my old department and the CEO in tow. My boss saw me and said arrogantly, decided to came back and beg for your job back, you little R-word? Me, nah, just to inspect my new office cause you are fired by now. He laughed and said that I am under him, and only the CEO can fire him. So the CEO came around the little corner and said to my boss, get the duck out of my company, you are fired, and I make sure that every company knows what you did. My ex-boss was white as a sheet. After that, the CEO called the police and reported him trespassing. In the end, I got a 70K raise and a bonus option, which I declined and asked if we can split it for my coworkers. I don't need that much money, 1 million euro worth of bonuses. My CEO agreed and everyone got their job back and we complete the audit without any fails. The customer was happy, and so we are too. If you have questions, I will answer them in the commands. The next one is a malicious compliances story. When I was a lactation breastfeeding nurse almost a decade ago, I was only one of two who covered the whole hospital on nights. Only one of us was there on any given day, and we had to cover mother-baby, women's special care, pediatric special care, newborn ICU, and step-down. Our unit director told us the nurse case managers who worked days were too busy to get home breast pumps for patients, even though durable medical equipment was 100% their responsibility and don't do any patient care. At the time, they only ordered pumps for patients that had to be separated from their babies or had some problem like low birth weight. Therefore, it was not that labor-intensive with maybe 2-3 patients per shift between 2 case managers needing the pumps. Believe it or not, breastfeeding is way harder at night when new parents are tired, sleep-deprived, and trying to nurse a tiny, ravenous night owl. We had to take over the breast pump duty on top of rounding on all the babies on mother-baby, 24 rooms, any kiddos having problems on other units, and taking pages to help as needed throughout the hospital. We had to verify the patient's address, phone number, etc., and offer them freedom of choice of the company they use to order the pump. Then we would have to go to the doctor on service and ask for a prescription for the pump and get it written before the next day so case management could fax it over and follow up if needed. They were willing to do just the last steps of the process. As I was passionate about my job, but also saucy, I agreed happily. But I didn't just get prescriptions for the higher-risk babies. I got prescriptions for every single baby in the hospital who was being breastfed every single shift. I also convinced the other night lactation nurse to do the same. We sent every breastfeeding family home with a double electric breast pump. The Affordable Care Act made insurance cover them. The RN case managers had dozens of scripts to fax and follow up on, and the docs and midwives got irritated with us asking for 15 times more scripts than normal. However, no one could argue with my logic that all breastfeeding people deserve to have a pump that is covered by insurance, and that teaching on how to express milk and give them tools to do it will increase breastfeeding rates and duration. This was a baby-friendly hospital, a designation that they had to work for to try to attract patients. So anyone who protested looked ridiculous. They eventually made it a standard of care that every breastfeeding family was offered a pump. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.